Well, it's been less than a month since Burning Crusade Classic has launched, and the thing we were all expecting to happen has happened, much to the surprise of, well, some people, judging from comments that I've read online. And though I'm not surprised that it's happened, I am a little bit taken aback at the speed that it has. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Will E, and today we're talking about the faction population problem. I don't think it's going to get any better anytime soon. And it's not to do with the amount of people playing overall, that number appears to be very healthy, but it's how the players are divided up between the Horde and the Alliance. The anticipated exacerbation of the split between Horde and Alliance has grown exponentially in the Burning Crusade, and there are a number of reasons that has happened, which we've been over quite a few times. Players have really begun the segregation of Alliance to PvE and Horde to PvP realms, even more so than we'd seen in previous areas of the game when faction population had been an issue, such as Phase 2 in Classic, for example. And talking about the populations for this video, we will be using the website ironforge.pro to reference quite a few times. Now, I admit it's not perfect, but it's about the best source that we have to go off of. It pulls the player numbers from raids, so if you play on multiple different characters, you could show up as multiple different people. But see for yourself the numbers shown on your server and whether they feel about correct. I think it does a relatively good job at portraying the population. It was clear moving from Classic through the Dark Portal to the Burning Crusade that the expansion was going to present a new set of issues when it came to open world player versus player. Outlander's a lot smaller, we have flying, there's reason for level cap players to be in all zones, and the issue of population when it comes to PvP has really started to arise, as Horde players have found that they have an absolutely enormous honor grind ahead of them, much to the suffering of the Alliance players who are still trying to stick out the leveling when they're being ganked, very akin to how life was in Phase 2 if you were level 48 on a PvP server. Cast your mind back to Phase 1 in Classic when everybody was starting fresh and equal. It presented some of the most fair and balanced PvP that's been seen in the game, well, at least as much as you can say for an open world MMO like World of Warcraft. Phase 2 rolls around and suddenly players are incentivized to farm people level 48 and upwards for honor points, and they're encouraged to do so by a system which pits player against player on their own faction to see who can get the most honor, which led to a very toxic environment for anybody who was not even at level cap yet, as well as for the people who were trying to play in the evening at peak time or who were the minority faction on their server. At that point in time, Blizzard opened up free transfers to other servers, which led to mass exoduses of entire guilds overnight. Alliance populations vanished from PvP servers in a matter of days, much to the chagrin of Horde players who have been camping Ironforge. Of course, this happened to some Horde servers too, but just to a much lesser extent. I myself decided to make the change from PvP back over to PvE, which I'd always played on retail, around the end of Phase 5, because I knew for TBC, seeing how things were in Phase 2, that it wasn't going to be for me if it was anything like Phase 2 would have been. And that situation has very much rematerialized itself as we start to progress and really settle into the expansion. Let's look at some numbers, shall we? Ironforge.pro shows archived data for the populations that existed right at the end of Classic, and you can see that actually there was a higher percentage of Alliance players overall when compared to the Horde players. Now, whilst we are only a short bit into TBC, we can see that the population has fully flipped around at this point in time, with the Horde making up the majority of the player base. Now, if we dig a little bit deeper beyond this and look at how many people are on PvP compared to PvE on our Classic archive, it's fairly balanced actually, with a small skew to the Horde side. Looking over at TBC though, we can see this number has been an absolute landslide for the Reds, who have picked up an enormous amount of new players by the looks of things. Going on to have a quick look at PvE, here's our Classic archive. That is about what I expected it to look like, an absolutely enormous amount of Alliance players. And then finally looking at BC at the moment, there is actually some new players on the Horde side as well, but still Alliance is very much favoured on the PvE side of the game. So what we can see there is a noticeable shift from there being a majority of Alliance over to Horde, and for the Horde population on PvP to have grown exponentially whilst also increased on the PvE side to a certain degree. Simply put, there are more Reds than Blues now. They are finally starting to take over. This has been the case in retail for a long period of time as well, and there are a number of reasons why you would play either faction, of course. It's not all down to I want to have the best racials, though that will certainly come into it to a certain degree, especially when it comes to PvP. Blood Elves were introduced for the Horde, which are the most popular race on retail by some margin, alongside the Paladin, a brand new class which many people main as well. This is true for the Alliance as well when it comes to Draenei and Shamans, but to a lesser extent than Blood Elves. Blood Elves were sort of that tipping point where back in the day there were more Alliance players similar to what we saw in Classic, and they wanted to give people a gentle nudge to say, would you like to play Horde instead? We've got Paladins and we've got Elf Girls now as well, so what's not to like there? The faction split, simply put, is gonna get more and more severe, and I don't think it will ever flip around to being Alliance favored ever again, which sounds pretty extreme, but there's a number of reasons for that. The quote-unquote better faction situation on Classic is repeating itself as it has done on retail, and the negative effects that brings when we don't have our cross-server functionalities or sharding are really beginning to rear their heads, chiefly with the amount of honor that Horde players have to grind to be able to earn their PvP off pieces for the current season. Now this is a problem at the moment, it'll be a problem in Season 2, in Season 3, and in Season 4, because each new season has off pieces from honor. Horde have to wait a lot longer than Alliance to find queues for Battlegrounds because they just have more people in them. But hold on, we just saw a moment ago that Alliance actually had a higher overall population than the Horde back in Classic. And what did Horde have for Battlegrounds in Classic still? That's right, they had queues despite there being actually more Alliance players. Alliance people don't do as much PvP, I don't think. I believe this is true for retail as well. There isn't any substantive proof of that other than gut feeling, and well, you just look at the queues and that's kind of proof enough, isn't it? More people on the Horde want to PvP, be it casual or competitive or otherwise. A big draw to get people over to the Horde now would have been the racial bonuses, which I still believe firmly are better than what the Alliance has. I know people will say Perception's good, Stoneform's good, Shadow Mail can be nice for druids for drinking. Most of the racial benefits come from the fact that rogues are really broken in TBC, whereas things like Will of the Forsaken, Hardiness are just sort of blanket good against a lot of different classes. The real benefit that Alliance has compared to Horde when it comes to PvP is the hidden racial called no queue time. And what do Horde players do when they enter their queue and have to wait for 60 minutes? They go back out into the open world to gank people because it's efficient honor. That's pretty much it. If it weren't efficient honor and they could get instant queues and just rotate between battlegrounds, you could do that instead. But that isn't the case, so that means that levelers are once again suffering. I've heard people mention a number of potential resolutions for this issue, including the rather controversial Mercenary Mode, which I believe was originally brought into the game of Warlords of Draenor. And I've seen, well, probably more faction conflict on various forums over the past week than I've seen in game for a long time over this issue. Now, if you've watched me for a while, I'm the stereotypical Alliance PvE guy who does PvE. PvP hasn't really been the main focus in the game for me for a very long time. It used to be, but maybe that's a subject for another video. But what I want you guys to think about when it comes to Mercenary Mode is think back to Classic. You know Alterac Valley. You know how Alterac Valley went for the majority of the game. I did Exalted 3 times over. The first one I did was in the first week when Alliance just won every game. And then the pre-mating discords got broken down. People went to play Warsong or Arathi Basin, and eventually it turned into Alliance go to Stonehearth, semi-AFK, and then Horde win eventually. And Horde won about 99% of the games. I don't think that is even an exaggeration. And I played some of those games on my Horde Shaman, and I had to wait over an hour and a half for each of those games, but we won them very fast and efficiently. And during that time when Horde was winning every single Alterac Valley, I didn't remember a single person asking for Mercenary Mode then, because despite you having an outrageously long queue, you're pretty much guaranteed to win. The thing is, at the moment, you do your outrageously long queue, and then you get an Alliance pre-made and get absolutely rolled. Pretty much as I've been saying for a while, I think pre-mading is still an issue. I think now, even if you reduce the size of a pre-made, the fact that it's existed for so long may have driven away some of the more casual players who may queue up Battlegrounds for fun because they're just so used to getting rolled at peak times that they just decide to stop engaging with that piece of content. Again, adding to the length of queue times. What else do we have? Well, in Wrath the Lich King, we had faction transfers. They were a paid service, of course, so I can see that one being popular. But if faction transfers were introduced uninhibited, can't help feel as though it would have the exact opposite effect of what you want. Rather than getting people over to the Alliance, it may just in fact make things even worse. What about restricted or free faction transfers? Possibly, they could be a thing, but it's sort of like with the open transfers at the moment. Blizzard want you to go from a server which is very active to a server which is usually kind of dead. Or the example given here, would you like to go from Gehenna's Horde to either Stonespire and never see another Alliance player ever again, or 10 Storms and never see another Alliance player ever again? That's not really much of a choice, to be honest. This is similar to what happened during the free faction transfer days in Phase 2. Maybe this is just how the game kind of works and it'll resolve itself in Wrath of the Lich King. That's when humans get every man for himself and Will of the Forsaken gets nerfed to share a cooldown with a PvP trinket. Humans at that point will really become the de facto go-to PvP race. So will that solve it? Actually, no, I don't think it will either, because our battle groups are region-wide, not, well, you know, your regular battle groups that we had back then. People who are very competitive with PvP are highly incentivized to be on a small amount of servers, so they'll have people to queue with. You can't invite people cross-server, so you're kind of forced to do this. So if anything, the population might change from Horde majority to Alliance on a couple of servers, but I really doubt it's going to overall make a significant shift in the player base. In fact, with the PvP pooling being done entirely region-wide, you're pretty much doing yourself a disservice by remaining on a realm that doesn't have a large PvP player base. It's a tough one, it really is, and this is a situation which has grown on retail as well when you look at Horde being more favourable for top-end players when it comes to PvE content. You may remember not so long ago I did my video on why I think factions basically suck and just don't work in the long run, and this is sort of showing us again why that is the case. But this time really fast compared to retail. So pretty much as we started with, I'm not surprised it's happened, but the extent to which it's already happened is a little bit shocking, to be honest. Let me know your thoughts on it all, whether you have any solutions at all which you think could be realistic, because I'm a little bit stumped, to be honest. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.